That's it.
I'll keep an eye on the time.
Well, welcome once again to ArtBreak, everyone. It's wonderful to see such a great turnout. This is really unusual, but we're delighted to see everyone here. We're going to continue with our series of featuring artists who are represented in the 2024 West Michigan Area Show. And today we have two painters with us, Michael Pfleghaar and Vicki Nelson. We're going to start with Vicki, and I should say it's quite nice, the arrangement. If you go into the gallery, their paintings are right next to each other, so it makes a, I think, interesting comparison. Vicki's a retired architect, and since her retirement about 9 years ago or so, we said, she's been really involved with painting and taking that quite seriously. One of her main focuses is people, and particularly representing people in different environments. And even though she works for reference from photographs, her paintings are quite interesting because you can see that she will emphasize certain things and make subtle adjustments, use different, they're a departure, and they really become kind of an environment in themselves. The picture that's represented in the show is entitled The Howards, and it won the Art League award this year. And in it you see these 7 figures, and what's interesting, the relations between them. Some are quite close, others are separate. One is at the center, is just totally isolated. And so there's this interesting kind of narrative aspect to this as well. I should say another interesting aspect of Vicki's work, she spent a great deal of time with the indigenous Maya people in Guatemala, and that has inspired a series of paintings as well. So please welcome Vicki Nelson.
Thank you, Michael. I didn't know you knew that much about me. Okay. And here they are. Here are the Howards. So thank you all for coming and to listen to us. I appreciate this opportunity so much because, as I was telling Michael as we were chatting before we started, I've only been at this for a while, and now I had a chance to sort of ponder what I've been up to. Why am I doing it? Where are the ideas coming from? And so I came up with 3 areas of experience or ideas. This is my work table at home, and I'm using it for bullet points. There's, to remind me. So there's photography, there's figure drawing, and there's architecture. As Greg mentioned, I'm a retired architect. I went to school in Austin in the 70s, and this is a drawing of the facade of our wonderful building. And something I discovered there in a sort of little way, but it grew during my career, and it's just motivated me through the years, and I think it's come into the art, is the idea that you can take something that is intangible. It's a feeling, it's an emotion, it's an aspiration, an idea, and you can put solidity, you can put space around it. You can put light in a way to reveal it. You can use color. You can use all those elements of architecture and hopefully painting as well to embody ideas. I just love that idea. So shortly after I retired, as Greg mentioned, my husband and I went to Guatemala for 2 months, and we stayed in an apartment, and we looked over this courtyard below. And I'm, of course, as the architect, I was interested in the facade and the buildings and the light and perspective. But also from my career, I was interested in how people use their space and how other people live. So I'd hear them out there in the courtyard, and I'd run out and I'd miss them. But I saw the laundry came out, and then later in the day, the laundry went away. I just missed them again. And at night, it's hard to see in this image. It comes up better at the night one. There's an outdoor kitchen place near those like garbage cans, and that's where they did their dishes. Dishes are clanking. I'll get them now, and I'd run out and I'd miss them yet again. But I liked the way the light changed. So architecture has definitely been in there, and then figure drawings. So my first official life drawing class was my freshman year in college, because I started in studio art and later changed to architecture. And it was a required course, life drawing. Well, I didn't know what that meant, life drawing. Okay, so I went to class, and as I recall, in my memory, I'm sitting in the front row, and a young man comes to the front and he takes off his robe, and there we are. It's life drawing. So I learned about that then. And then over the years, thanks to the KIA and my current teacher, Josh, there, I've had lots of opportunities to continue with the practice. But what I wanted to do with it goes back to that idea of embodying something intangible. I wanted to use figures in a series I did to see if the body literally could express ideas. And I worked with a wonderful model and gave her a prompt, an emotion or an idea, and she struck a pose. And sometimes it's the face, sometimes it's the body position telling you something about what that person's perhaps experiencing. So then I found that I wanted to combine places and people, as Greg was saying. And so now we've got the figures moving into environments. But why? And what does the environment, how does it work with the figure? And what does it say about the person? And so this one is, again, from Guatemala. And I saw this woman waiting for a ceremony to start. We were there for the high school graduation or program we were working with. And I was sort of struck by her and did work from a photograph, of course. And then for her environment, I chose this sort of abstracted field of what's meant to be pine needles. And it's pine needles because in Guatemala, for important events, important times in your life, pine needles are spread across oftentimes the dirt floor as part of the decoration. And so I thought maybe she's thinking back about that time in her life. And then, again, the architect comes through. Scale can come into the picture. The idea of how a person relates to a building in terms of just physical size, and how does that make us feel? And I think this guy's actually just taking a smoke break, but I don't know how he feels, but I wanted to compare the two. And this is in Antigua, Guatemala. One of the programs we worked with for many years was a school in a very rural, remote place, San Andres Sacabaja. That's where the older woman was sitting, waiting for graduation. And when we'd visit this town, often we'd eat at this outdoor breakfast place. And I noticed this woman, she was there cooking, and the look on her face intrigued me. Who knows what's really going on, of course, but in my mind, maybe it's that sense of I'm sort of anchored here or stuck here, isolated here, and there's a world out there that I may or may not get to experience because that's part of the reality for many people there. And so I tried using color and contrast and light contrast to portray that. This is a little closer to home. You all may recognize Water Street or on Oakland Drive. And this is just a matter of questions for me. Can light tell us something about how that person's feeling or make us feel a certain way? And what about the different qualities of light? And what's going on with this lady in her book? Has the world disappeared and that's why the cafe is empty? Is she lonely? Now I have time, so I'm going to diverge from my comments. So I'm taking class with Joshua Dietrich right here, and we had an interesting discussion yesterday. And I mentioned my theme, my idea of abstract things or intangible things being embodied by space or by paint or what, how do we express them? And he asked me a question about the fact that oftentimes we make a painting and people interpret it entirely differently than what was going on in us, and that's fine. And did I experience that in architecture? And I'm sure that's often the case. My initial response is that as architects, we want to create places that offer as many interpretations as possible, as many ways people can use the space. Will they sometimes interpret it wrong? Sure, that's going to happen too. But so I'm not, this is open. Whatever, people see is what they see. I know what I was thinking about, but it was an interesting thing to ponder and talk about. So as you all recall, in February of 2022, this happened in Ukraine. And this is a photograph by the photojournalist Lindsay Addario for the New York Times. And I was really moved by this image. This woman is standing there, literally on the edge of a big change in her life. She seems to almost be touching the concrete of what was formerly a cozy and welcoming home. The word liminal came to mind in the sense of being between things, being in a space between what was before and what may come in the future. And so I decided to work with that idea, and I looked it up, and the root of the word means, the Latin root means threshold, and she's actually literally on the threshold. And I was just taken by that. So I worked with the actual photograph and tried to bring out the ideas of before and after, the way dawn or dusk is a liminal time, placement of her foot, the objects in her house. It just really moved me. And so back to how do you embody that idea, I started thinking about what are other liminal experiences we have. And sometimes they're happy ones. A baby is born. And sometimes they're ones in which we place ourselves. Right now, we have a really good friend, and actually my husband's out there with him, hiking the Appalachian Trail. Our friend's a thru hiker. He's done 1,100 miles of the 22 so far. And he's taken 6 months out of his life to put himself in a liminal space in a very unfamiliar place to sort of think through things at this juncture. So I thought about that, and this is actually Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. And perhaps this woman is going through something like that. And I also liked the way the natural features suggested a doorway, a threshold. So the third thing I wanted to share with you all is photography and what that has meant to me. Again, my first opportunity to really take a course was in architecture school. And at the time, the big thing because we had one on our campus with street photographers. Gary Winograd was on campus at the time. So my teacher talked a lot about him and about street photography, and I found it fascinating. And the book is a series of photographs by Robert Frank, one of the famous street photographers working mid-century. But the photograph is mine, and it was taken on the occasion of the gathering after my grandfather's funeral in 1976. So that's my family there. And I also took this photograph, which may look familiar. So thinking about liminal places, I remembered this old photograph, and I remembered the look on my grandmother's face. And I thought I'd try to work with it. I was getting a little choked up thinking about this, because the opportunity you all have given me today to air some of these ideas made me realize some things I hadn't about my work or about where I'm going with it. As I painted this, I felt that dry, hot Texas air. This is the funeral took place in Cleburne, Texas. And so I drove up from school in Austin. But I've been going to this farm over the years since I was a little kid. And I remembered the way the air felt and the crunchy grass, because it was dry, and the locusts or grasshoppers were all over the place. And so the burnt sienna is a color base that's all through it. And that was just intuitive feeling that color's right. And then the rest of the color came from the notion of memory and how memory fades. So kind of looks like, those old color photographs everybody has in a drawer somewhere, they're fading. Or Kodachrome, remember Kodachrome? And that, fades. And so I'm painting these people, and I'm thinking about those experiences, and noticing even that as I painted my father's face, he's the man standing to the left side, directly behind the woman in the blue dress. Today would be his birthday, by the way. As I painted his face and worked to get the likeness right, I saw my son's face come through. It was just, again, that connection with the past and the present. And the other thing that was sort of intuitive, but now it's interesting to discover why I did it. There's foreground, middle ground, background. Of course, foreground is very realistic. Middle ground, sort of. And the background, an artist friend commented, if you want to really make it recede, what do? Oh, you desaturate. Okay. Because it's not really receding. And I thought about it. I don't want it to. I want it to be flat. I want it to be abstract, because the farther our memories get away, the more they change, they evolve. And so this is about a memory. Here I go. It's darn it, I'm crying worse than I was when I practiced. So the memory of going to my family's farm all my life as we drove down there from Iowa, the memory of course, my family members, and being on my grandparents' farm. Thank you. And so I understand that I'm to take questions, and then Michael will go. So yeah, we have plenty of time. If there's
What medium are you using?
oil on canvas. I guess I explained pretty well, huh? Well, then I'll let Michael go. And the questions later. I'm sorry. Yes.
So you described positioning people in space, etc. Did you find any challenges or benefits working off of photographs, and how frequently do you work off of photographs?
The question is, do I find benefits from working off of photographs for placing people, and how often do I do that? I consider myself an emerging artist, so I'm using photographs a lot. But this is a great question, because now the question for me is, how do I want to manipulate that to create something. And so I figured out, I used color and distance to create this notion of memory. In this case, I'm working with a piece now. It's an old photograph, but to get the right feeling, I wanted one of the ladies, it's a bunch of ladies on a patio. I wanted one of them to float. So yeah, I guess I need to rearrange her. Yeah, because it's all about composition, right? And, so thanks. Jeff.
What's that book, The Americans, doing for your work?
I love street photography. So I asked for it for Christmas when I retired. And I just, the street photographers are good at finding composition out there in the real world and just the humanness of us. One photograph I'll never forget is a guy standing at a flagpole, but the flag has covered his face. And I don't know, I find it funny. I find it very human. I guess what it's doing is it's pointing out to me what I like about composition and people and humor and things. So I think there was yes, ma'am.
Yes, many artists flow into painting. Many architects, I should say. I have a dear friend in Wyoming that has done the same thing. And I wonder if it's easier after being an architect to move into this type of thing.
Well, there's some architects here you can ask as well. Yeah, I mean, the difference is you have to figure out, you're the client now, and you have to figure out what you want to express. And that's hard because we've worked hard all these years to get into other people's heads and pull out what they want. And don't tell me how many rooms, tell me what you want it to feel like, So I imagine they do. Norm Hammond.
Can you talk a little bit more about just the process of when you were creating the faces and you saw different family members?
Yeah, that was a moving experience. The only time I saw someone else was in my dad, because as my son is now 37, and it's just, he's never worn glasses, and he picked out a pair of glasses that looked like the pictures of my dad after World War II when he's wearing these kind of round, glasses. I didn't have that experience with the others so much as I felt a connection, and really some of them I didn't know that well because we live so far away. But it was nice to be with them. It was an odd feeling. All righty, Michael, your turn.
Well, thanks, Vicki. Oh, that was great. Well, our next artist is Michael Pfleghaar, and he's from Grand Rapids, and really appreciate him taking the time to come down and share his work with us. He too is a representational artist. I guess in a very sort of generic way, you might describe his work as in still lifes. They're often contemporary interiors with arrangements of plants, often near windows or in sort of a interesting sort of space where the inside and outside are present, such as the work that's represented in the show, which is called Indoor and Outdoor. But these rather ordinary scenes really begin to take on a special life of their own, really through the creative imagination of the artist and the way he kind of plays with this line between reality and abstraction. You can look at this painting and recognize by the leaves what kind of plant is there, and yet it also becomes an interesting shape that reacts with these other shapes. And as a result, his works have this kind of wonderful sense of rhythm, pattern, almost kind of a musical quality to them that is further enhanced by his, I think, really sophisticated use of color as well as shape and pattern. Should also add that Michael's also a sculptor. He does these sort of playful botanical forms that are not unlike his representations in his paintings. And he was also one of the artists who was selected to install a terrazzo installation at the Grand Rapids Gerald R. Ford Airport, which you can see if you're up there. This is in their new concourse. So please welcome Michael Pfleghaar.
Hello, thank you for coming and welcoming me. I want to start, I saw this great quote today by one of my favorite artists, David Hockney. It's his birthday. So on social media, there's a lot of posts. He had, quote, "Art is about sharing. You wouldn't be an artist if you didn't want to share an experience." So I thought that was a great thing that just popped up today. My work is formally and conceptually about relationships. Formally, the paintings are tension between realism and abstraction. I use exaggeration, color, flattening of space, and hard edges, which reference the objects and the painting as an object. Conceptually, I draw on my surroundings as a reflection of oneself. So when I do these talks, I like to kind of go through my history and kind of give you a little sampling of my development as an artist, hopefully to give you a little bigger picture of how I arrived at what's in the gallery next door. I'm not a great public speaker, so I like to use the work as prompts. So here we go. So this is a work from undergrad in the late 80s. I used a lot of figurative work. This is actually me in 3 different positions in a small studio apartment, which seemed like as big as that space, that painting itself. This is another painting with friends. We used to do go to a local bar and drink and draw. We called it experiments in drinking and drawing. So you'll also see that the colors are kind of dark and moody and very kind of melodramatic. At the time, I kind of subscribed to the idea that to be an artist, you had to struggle and, that kind of college angst. And I actually had a professor say, "You'll never make a living as an artist." So I've kind of used that as kind of fire to kind of push on, and used it, turned it around, and I've proved him wrong. So after I graduated, I kind of threw out everything that I had learned as far as the subject and objects, coloration. And so I kind of just focused on objects around me and kind of really used a lot of plants and still lifes to represent in my paintings. I also started seeing furniture as kind of the surrogate for the figure in my work. And so I started animating objects like this table and chair, almost as if they're dancing. Another from that series, kind of, creating a little story through still life objects without any figures involved. So that's what I kind of meant about the objects become the figures in the story. So at the same time, I was, so those paintings were oil on canvas. I was fortunate to work for an artist, Stephen Duran, who's a local artist. He's quite well known. And I picked up, I never worked with oil pastel before, and I kind of, being a studio assistant for him for 3 years, I just kind of learned how to use oil and oil pastel on paper mostly through observation of his work. And these are all settings from apartments that I lived in using oil pastel. So here's this is a 6 by 6 foot painting of one of my apartments I had after a separation from a partner. So I kind of finally got to decorate the place how I wanted. And as you can see, I kind of have a flair for brightly colored furniture and very expressive kind of contemporary and mid-century modern influence objects. So this was from that period. So this, again, an interior space with chairs. There's a little figure on this. A friend made this pillow with a guy holding a bird. So there is, kind of a slight little figure inserted in this piece. This is oil on canvas 3 by 3. So that's projected quite a bit larger than it is. I also like the idea of, instead of having figures, show pictures of pictures. So I have documented some photographs and a vase that kind of has a face profile to kind of, play with the idea of figures being there, not being there. So I've gone through kind of different stages in my life with my work, and so I kind of started out playing around with some kind of more made up imagery from my head, potted plants, kind of to group together, obviously kind of all relating to each other, touching, crowded in, a lot of movement. So again, reinforcing that idea that these are surrogates for kind of a group of people. At least that was the motivation. Like Vicki said, I don't think an artist should have definitely an intention that this is the idea I want you to see. I'm just telling you how I approach my work, and you're free to really bring your experiences and your life to them and view them in that way, whichever way. Again, another one of these from this series. And then these are a couple early samples of my clay work. I dabbled in clay in undergrad, but the Urban Institute for Contemporary Arts in Grand Rapids at one time had a community clay studio. And so I joined that and was able to play around with terracotta. It's funny, these forms were always kind of flat, much like a painting, and kind of two-sided, but kind of followed that kind of in the same time period as those previous two paintings. And these little kind of whimsical potted plants, I continue to make those today, and you'll see some kind of later kind of versions of them, but these are some of the first ones I did. So in 2009, I kind of felt like I had reached a plateau creatively. I can't say that word right now for some reason, but so I kind of was at a block, and I decided to go to grad school late in life. So this is where my work kind of made a complete shift to abstraction. And again, so this is kind of showing the reference for this painting. It's called Shell. And so it's a Charles and Ray Eames designed plastic shell chair that Herman Miller produces to this day. And so I kind of dissected the shapes and the forms and made this mixed media painting that has spray paint. It has stain. It has this plastic material you pour over the surface, so it has some depth to it too, and cutouts. So my idea was to kind of capture the spirit of mid-century modern design, the objects that I was depicting in my older work, the objects that were inspiring my work, but trying to capture that spirit without being literal was the whole process of my kind of grad school work. So this is actually the side of the last painting where I would actually construct the wood panel that it would that the painting was made on by building up layers of plywood, and it gives that nice kind of repetition of linear marks. That also that idea of the painting is an object instead of a picture of something. So that was kind of the thinking behind this work. Again, this is another kind of Eames related Eames molded plywood chair, kind of dissected and using the shapes to kind of create the composition. This piece is called Aha. It's actually quite three-dimensional. There's so that kind of was, there's this stool that Philippe Stark designed that was called Aha. It's kind of a plastic, kind of everyday stool. And I thought about taking one of those apart and kind of using the motif, this kind of hourglass motif, and building a composition. It was also kind of, when you have an aha moment, this was kind of at a very, turning point in my work, the whole shifting from picture to object. So from grad school, this, I started using ready-made objects and making these little constructions. So a ready-made is just, like Marcel Duchamp used the urinal, put it in a different context and called it art. So I was, using these 50s beehive lamps that I was really interested in collecting at the time, and incorporating those into these little wall hangings, and created this little kind of piece of furniture that leaned against the wall with a little lamp on the side. How are we doing on time? Oh, this isn't the real time, right? Is it? It's not 1 o'clock. Okay, all right. Okay, good. All right. Another one, a painting taking on, it stands on its own little leg that kind of comes up. So this was all just kind of playing with different ideas of kind of breaking out of the pictorial and playing with lots of different ways of making images. So this is a shaped canvas on wood, kind of inspired by a chair. You can kind of see references to legs, etc. I too have used photographs a lot as inspiration in my work, but another great tool that I came upon was the Apple iPad Pro, which allowed you to draw with a stylus and Apple Pencil and create imagery, on a tablet. So this is some of my first work on that iPad, my drawings. I did tons of them. This was kind of a transitional piece back into the botanical work. So this is also a digital drawing. So it was fun. That's also something that David Hockney did, and he continues to do. He does a lot of drawing on the iPad. So oftentimes I'll use these as sketches for larger works, or I can even go in, import a picture into the program, and actually kind of color over areas to kind of work out ideas. So I'm a Virgo. I don't know if people subscribe to astrology, but I'm a very uptight, very organized, I like things very black and white. And I think that's what spurred this kind of attraction to doing a series of potted plants on plant stands. So this was the first plant stand painting I did. It's kind of this weird tripod plant stand with, so again, it's these objects become a little conversation between themselves. One of the techniques that I learned when I was doing the abstract work was using different kind of masking materials to get hard edges. In reality, things do have hard edges. So it was one of those things that just kind of clicked when I started using different ways to mask off the picture and get those hard edges. But I also loved still having, contrast that against some really painterly and kind of loose areas. So these are all from that series of plant stands, and I still do them. I hope the viewer does see. I mean, I think they have a little bit of humor and a little bit of left of center. My work is kind of always angled, or which maybe I think a lot of artists are struggle with anxiety and depression and things. So I think maybe that's why I see the world kind of slanted, or I think that it's more attractive that way than things being very static and still. So these plants, to me, the ones I choose to pick, they have such personality. They're almost like this one plant is almost stroking the chair, So that's kind of what I am trying to get at, this kind of personifying the figure in the work. This is one of my favorites. It really kind of came together. It's pretty much all the elements are masked off, so they're very hard edged. But again, I love that control. But within the leaves, the foliage, it's still very painterly and controlled. Same here. These are all I'm showing mostly important paintings, and I tend to work 3x3. Now I'm using mostly acrylic and flash, which is a vinyl-based paint. It has a really nice, beautiful matte finish, much like gouache does. And so I use it a lot in the background, like this beautiful blue is completely flat. So I love the idea of flatness against volume. And I also am kind of impatient. So the oil, I moved away from the oil, especially when I started working with mixed media, just because of it's easier to combine media if they're all kind of water-based is what I was finding. Plus the environmental issues around oil paint and the solvents and things. Plus just the drying time too. I've kind of moved away from that. And also, I think a lot of the things that I depict, the furniture and such, it just seems to, so much of it has a plasticity in real life that it just made sense to kind of stay with a kind of acrylic and flash and spray paint. So here's a more recent iteration of the potted plants. They're having a little more volume. These kind of a trio of snake plant inspired vessels. Most of the work is just sculptural. It's not utilitarian. And these are kind of they're foliage, the leaves on the outside, but if you were to stand over them and look down, there's a blossom, the bloom is on the inside. So that's kind of that thought process behind those. So this is kind of the first grouping. I've gone through stages in my life where I've done the ceramics and then I've taken long periods off. So this was from maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I first started back at it. So, and you may notice in this next slide, I depicted some of those little potted plants in the vessel that was in the last picture in this piece. I have an affiliation with Oxbow School of the Arts and Artist Residency in Saugatuck. I've gone to a 5-week artist residency there. I've taught there, and they just have fabulous little studios and spaces all throughout the campus. And this was a little setting from one of the areas, and so I called this the School of Inspiration. This was a piece that a few years back I won Best of Show here. It was, I believe, 2020. It was during COVID. It was very strange. There was going to be a show, and then there wasn't, but I was happy that this piece won Best of Show here. So now my current process is to work more, kind of playing more with furniture and the plants, playing off of each other. And I also use light as kind of I depict the light very solidly, kind of and use that as a compositional element. But it's very abstracted, but I think that's something you'll see here and here, these arcs of light and shapes, flat areas against places I choose to paint with volume. I like that contradiction. I think there's this balance that never really kind of levels out in the work. During COVID, I moved to working from home a lot. This was my corner home office, and the light coming through the blinds was really striking. This wasn't a piece especially that I had to use photography to kind of to get the kind of record the kind of patterns and the color play that I wanted to achieve. A lot of it's made up in the process of the painting, but I also am playing with different kinds of perspective and repetition of lines. Patterning is another thing I'm very interested in. Here's kind of a similar view with a different kind of plants. stand. So the windows too is kind of a more recent experiment, you know, the idea of indoor-outdoor light coming from outside, kind of illuminating the composition, also making these wonderful patterns. Blinds especially are really, I just love playing with those shapes. This one is a 4x4 called the Healing Room, kind of this you know, bay window that's, you know, kind of providing the light for this whole setting of this whole gaggle of succulents and jade plants and salt lamps down at the bottom. This piece here and this piece were inspired by Oxbow again. They had this dining hall and they had painted on the walls these shapes. I think it was to prevent birds from flying into the windows or something, but I thought it made a great kind of backdrop, and again, a great way to play with shape. And oh, sorry, I went too fast. So this is the piece that's indoor-outdoor that's at across the hall in the show. And so when I've been talking a lot more recently about my work, for years I was never asked to talk, but so in the process for one of my last shows, I was given this drawing that I did on black velvet at age 9, and I thought, how telling is this, that at age 9 I, you know, had this color sense and shape and interest in pattern, so we really are formed at such an early age, and that does kind of stick with you the rest of your life. So I decided to kind of update this as a kind of a wild bouquet of flowers. So I started this series of bouquets. This was quite a wild one that I was asked to commission to do a painting for the Grand Rapids Community Foundation for Diana Seeger, who had been at the helm for 35 years and was moving on. So it was tricky. How do you symbolize someone's, you know, life and philanthropy for 35 years? So I thought, using the language that I use, you know, botanicals and flowers kind of represent it. It's a symbol that we use for a lot of occasions, and so I wanted to just have this overabundance of flowers just kind of filling the whole composition, and she did like it, so that was good. And this is a zinnia explosion, dahlia explosion. Every summer there's a ritual in my household of planting the dahlias, then cutting them, bringing them in, and then at the end digging them up and putting them in the basement. This is very, as you can tell, I love like the product, but I don't like the process. So I'm getting too old for that. I need a gardener. So here's some lilies from the garden and some Queen Anne's lace. So that's kind of that series. So the last few, we're almost done here, so no worries. This is from inspired by a restaurant that has this kind of interesting plant material all throughout, and then very interesting kind of tubular LED lighting from above. So I was really struck with this pencil cactus and how it was so linear, and the other plants as well, and then this kind of tubular light source above. I thought was great. So here again is kind of the playing with the groupings of plants and furniture, and also the using the light shapes as a compositional element to kind of keep your eye moving around. This is a agate kind of table. It's like all this kind of rock that's been polished, and this was from a friend's house in Chicago, and I was just struck by I just love the patterning of this coffee table, and then it had this, you know, red and green leafed plant that kind of like just popped off of it. So, I often get some inspiration from friends and wherever I go, travel. So here's some examples of that flash and acrylic on paper. So these, I like working 16 by 20. And I usually work vertical. So these are a few from that. So they're a little looser than the larger works, which tend to I work on them like months at a time usually. And so here's a installation shot of that the 3 terrazzo pieces that I did for the Ford airport. They were actually installed by a terrazzo company here in Kalamazoo, which was really great to work with them. And then I recently this is my most recent painting. It's 42 by 72, and I kind of used some of the same motifs that were in the way I approached the terrazzo work, and kind of blew it up into this forest meets water painting. So that's kind of where I am now. So thank you. No questions? Great. Yes, sir.
What kind of glazes are you using on those 3-dimensional pots? Because they're really bright.
Yeah, I use a lot of underglaze, which is pretty much you paint it on and you get what you get what it looks like what you get when it's fired. And you can.
It's fired and you still get that color.
Yeah, but I have been just using flash on it too, since they're not utilitarian. So I've been starting using spray paint, flash, and yeah.
That clear, that 7, I think it was the airport thing you did.
Yes.
That clear section you have on the floor. How you did that?
Okay, so it's a little bit like paint by number. So I came up with the design, and then they have someone take the design into CAD, and they make like a line drawing from that, and then you have to specify in each area what color goes where, or what combination. Terrazzo is like a mixture of different kinds of stones, glass, mirror, with resin, and it gets troweled on, and then it dries, and then it gets polished. But in between each color has to be a thin metal rod, and so that has to be made off-site, or that's how they did it here, and then they brought that in, and they do that from the CAD drawing. So that's why it's kind of like a coloring book, and that there's all these lines, and then the tradespeople just trowel in. Well, I didn't do that part. I just drew the design and specified the colors and the kind of terrazzo in each. But that was a interesting experience, and it'll be there for 100 years or so. So that's pretty cool too. So.
When you're not inspired
inspired by a photograph or something you just saw in your apartment or your friend's apartment? Do you see it in your mind, and then do you sketch it first, or do you just start painting?
I rarely just start painting without a plan. I'm just very, that's just not how I'm wired. I just always like to have some sort of plan. Things do change and develop along the way, and I think that's important, not be a slave to, what you have in your head may be wrong, or it may not be as interesting as another way of, so it's all just a starting point. But I usually, have a sketch or a photograph or something that I have a plan for. Yes?